Hello guys, I'm Super Ron. Welcome back to the channel, and we are back on the Caddy build at Autoshack. But as you can see, we are at the new Autoshack. This is our new base for our Autoshack builds. We have moved, and as you can see, this place is massive. We've just got the Caddy on the new Super Ron ramp, so this is where it will stay, and this is where progress will be made. So you saw in the last Caddy episode, we got this thing all back together, looking like a car again and rolling. We've got the massive Porsche brakes squeezed behind the wheels on the front, did the rear disc conversion with all the new bearings, and now it is a full free roller. So we've just pushed it in onto the Super Ron ramp, and we can carry on where we left off. So we packed everything into the car, and I've just started unboxing things to remind myself where we left off, because it's been 2 or 3 weeks now since I last worked on the car. My piping up of the air ride worked perfectly, so where you saw I joined all 4 bags together, put lots of T's in, and then put it one to valve, which we pumped up with the airline. That has not dropped a millimetre, so we are completely airtight on the system, which is good news. When we do plumb it into the manifold, we shouldn't have any leaks at all. As you can see, we are in a much bigger workshop. We have got 5 ramps here, but in turn, that means a much busier workshop and a much noisier workshop. So I'm not really sure how well the YouTube is going to carry on here. It's going to be very difficult to film. As you saw in all the previous episodes at the old place, 90% of the time it's just me on my own in the workshop. I could control the noise, I can control the lighting, I can control who was coming in and out, but here it is very different. We've got a whole team of people working. We've got compressors, we've got ramps going up and down, we've got the phone ringing. We've even got a petrol station here, so it's constant business going through every single day, every single minute. I'm still going to try and carry on the build. I'll film what I can, but I am quite a perfectionist with my videos. So if there's lots of background noise, if the radio's on, these are the kind of things I cannot control.
See you. This is now everything that we've cut off, and these are the bits left that we do need. So we've got this string coming along here. This is for all our pedals. We've got our drive-by-wire pedal.
Because when we started doing the YouTube at Autoshack, it was always work first, YouTube second. Luckily, the way I worked around it, because I was on my own, I could put out the great videos that you guys have been watching. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and still keep the filming and updates going. They may not be quite as in-depth, and it is going to be a lot more difficult to create the videos to the same standard as I used to when I was there on my own. But I'm sure you guys are still going to tune along and still catch up with the progress on the Caddy. So let's catch up on where we were with the project. This is a 1992 Mk1 Caddy, and we stripped it right down to a bare shell and fitted a 1.8 turbo engine out of an Audi TT. Everything has been detailed, cleaned, painted. All the metalwork has been powder coated. The engine has been fully resprayed. The engine bay has been smoothed, all the holes welded up, and that has been resprayed as well. We've got a full custom intercooler and radiator package. We made all the boost pipes, but the idea from the outside is to keep it as subtle as possible. So this is going to be a true sleeper. Everything is painted as shiny as the bodywork. The gearbox, the starter motor, everything is pristine. We've squeezed in the Porsche brakes behind the Porsche wheels, and although it's sitting up quite high at the moment, it is fully on air suspension. So we have the engine sitting on the floor when it's completely aired out. We've got the rear disc conversion on. Again, the rear does air right down, so it is sitting on the floor. But with the air ride, you can still lift it up, so it's practical. Inside, I've just started on the wiring. And that is what I'm just going through at the moment. Unboxing all the wiring looms that I'd started working on at the old workshop. Started making the plugs and the looms, so everything is going to be perfect. We've got the fuse box to go in. Just going over my notes, what we've got. But what I've started with is making up the starting and charging loom. So we've got the main power battery wires here. We've got this one at the top, that's for the starter solenoid, that connects to the key. We've got this one here, which is for the reverse light switch, that goes on the top of the gearbox. So these are all in this area, and then I'm going to sheath them all together so they're nice and tight. And then you've got these ones which go all the way back to the fuse box inside the car. So let's wrap these up like so. And then these
are all you're going to see in the bay, just those two little ears poking out the top of the power lead. This will go to the alternator and then that'll carry on inside the car. So let's get these fitted. And now it's on, you can see how nice, tight and discreet it is. So the reverse switch is there plugged in on the top. We've got the starter solenoid on the end and it is all hidden. It loops up and goes up to the alternator there, and it sneaks around the back, follows the ECU loom into the car. So the last bit we've got to do is the alternator light. So what I'm probably going to do is, here's the plug off the Audi with the two, one for the light and one for the DFM. But remember, we had these 4 spare wires that used to go to the speed signal and the oil level. So I'm going to use them for the oil pressure switches, because we have 2 switches now. But we've also got these 2 wires to the alternator. So I can connect them up to these. They already run inside the car with the engine loom, so it'll save running any other wires. We've got our 2 wires here, the blue one for the light and the brown one for the DMF. And they will all connect together and end up round under here. Bit dark, but they pop out next to the plug that we put in, so we can just put another plug on there. So here is our alternator plug all connected up to those wires. And the most important thing when you're changing loom colours is write it all down, otherwise the other end you won't have a clue. And the other 2 are for the oil pressure. So next up is getting the ECU loom connected into the Mk1 loom. So I've been chopping this down, thinning it all up, but we were left with all these deadheads. It's for things like secondary air injection, lots of solenoids and sensors we're not working with. So what I'm going to do is take these out of the ECU plug itself. These ECU plugs aren't too bad to get apart. Just have to take out this little pink clip here. That pops out. Just a little horseshoe like you get in a plug, and these just pull out. Like so, in this little cassette here. But they're not individual terminals on here that go into the ECU. It's one long strand, and then each wire is just pushed in like a Scotch lock. So all you have to do is just get a little pick in, and each wire pops out individually. They're not actual single terminals, and they just pop out like that. So there's no terminal on the end, they just press into each individual terminal on this cassette. So you've got to get a little hook in, and see the end coming up there, out it comes. So we'll get rid of all these other ones that we don't need, and that'll just make the whole thing look a lot tidier. Much better. So now we can slot that back in, and all this can be put in the bin, not needed, and we're left just with the essentials. So that slots back in, looks nice and tidy. Much nicer. Check. And that is our start and charge loom all installed on this side. As you can see, nicely tucked away. The 2 big power wires are all meshed together. We've got the starter solenoid wire on the front. Then we have got our reverse wires on the top, all nicely formed and uniform. And I achieved my objective of not having anything straying across to the front panel. It is all hidden away and now ends up inside. So we've got our main power wire to the starter motor. We've got our reverse lights and our start wire. So now we need to start thinking about where we're going to connect them to in here. We've got our ECU mounted, that's all there. This is the mount for the fuse box we're going in. Then we've got our factory fuse box going here. That's what all these plugs are for. Here is our original Mk1 fuse box. And all the plugs plug on the back. So each one only goes into a certain square. They do different things like the lighting loom, the dashboard loom, the rear lights, front lights, engine bay, and they all go in their separate squares there. But for the conversion, we're going to keep everything separate, and I'm going to run my own fuse box to here. So we've got one side of the ECU plugged in, but the other side is out ready on the bench. So this is the one that we thinned out, the one that usually connects to the car. We have lots of these plugs. So if we start up at the ECU, which is looking much neater now. The ones on this side are going to be in the engine bay. So this is the lambda. We've only got the front lambda in. We've removed the rear lambda wire in because we've had that deleted out because we haven't got a cat now. and this is the airflow meter. So these two are going to go through the bulkhead into the bay, and all of this is going to stay inside the car. So we've got these ones coming across. This is for the drive-by-wire throttle pedal, this one's for the brake light switch, and this one is for the clutch switch. So we are going to fit the brake light switch, because remember that does cancel out the drive-by-wire throttle. If anything ever goes wrong, the brake switch is the fail-safe. So we will connect that up to the Passat brake light switch that we fitted. It's got the two terminals, one that controls the ECU and the other that controls the brake lights. And then this is the wire for the clutch switch. We're not going to connect this up because it's quite difficult in a Mk1, but it's there just in case. So coming around here, this is where all our powers and everything are going to connect to the car. So this is our main power relay, which used to go to this plug, which feeds the coils in the car. And that goes through and that's controlled by the ECU, but that is actually fed from this red and green one here. So this is where the ECU loom gets its main power in on this brown plug. The red and green comes through and that powers the ECU directly from the battery. In here we've also got this black one, which is the ignition live. We've got this small one, which is the trace for the fuel pressure trigger. We've got this blue and yellow one, that's the feed for the airflow meter and the lambda sensor heater. So that needs to be controlled with the ECU. And then on the orange plug, we've just got these two little ones. This one is for the rev counter, that'll go to the rev box, and the grey one is for the OBD port. So that's what's left in the orange plug. And then we've also got the 14A plug, which we chopped off the engine side of the loom. So that is in the car now. And we chopped that off because it was in the wrong place. But this is where the engine loom gets all its feeds. The red and purple, that's for injector feed. And then we've got the yellow and black, that is for the sensors, the N75 valve and all the other sensors that are on the engine. And that is controlled by the fuel pump relay, which is in turn controlled by the ECU. So now we need to connect this to our car loom. So this is the white plug, which is our old engine loom, which goes in the back of the fuse box. And that is what will connect all our powers to. So some of these have got to stay. Strangely, in the engine loom is the wipers. So this will go up to the wipers, so that needs to stay. We've also got this thick one, that's for the starter motor. So that's going to connect to the loom that we just posted through with those big power wires. We've got our oil pressure high and low, so that's going to go on those new wires that we've just connected up at the front. So that will connect to there. We're going to connect these all behind the fuse box, so it's nice and neat. We've also got coolant temperature, so that sits behind the fuse box, and that will connect down to our engine loom via a resistor, so the gauge works properly. So that's all that accounted for. We've got our black one here, that's our ignition live, that will go to this black.
And everything engine wise is going to be controlled by this fuse box. I'm going to keep it separate from the main loom, so it's all self-contained. So if we ever have any problems, we'll just use these 6 fuses, we'll use 5 down this side, and we're pretty much copying the Vagtronics setup. So the top one is always for the main power. It's a bit of an idiot's guide. You just put the battery live straight to that fuse, then that connects to the green and red. And that goes all the way in, connects to the ECU first, and then also tees off that and goes into the main engine ECU relay. But all that really controls is the coils. So the ECU will turn that on, that will be the coils, and that will get its power straight from the battery. The second one is going to be ignition live, so we'll get that from the old engine loom, the black wire, to this side of the fuse, and the other side will be connected to our black wire in our brown plug. So that is the ignition live for the ECU, to tell it to wake up and do what it needs to do. Then the next 3 fuses will be controlled by the fuel pump relay, which will just be an aftermarket relay like this, and that is controlled by this purple and white wire. That will trigger the relay, and then that will send power to our first 3 fuses. That will get its main power from the battery input to the fuse box, which is this side of the fuse. That will go to the relay, and then when the relay is triggered, that will supply power to these 3 fuses and the fuel pump, which will be fuse number 6. So the first one will be for the sensors, the N75 valve and other bits and pieces around the engine loom, and that will connect to this yellow and black wire, which is now in our loom in our car. The next one will be for the airflow meter and the lambda sensor. So that's this blue and yellow wire, that will be powered by that. And the third one will be for the injectors, and that will be in this loom, which is the red and purple here. So that will power the injectors.
So they'll all be controlled by the ECU. And then the last one will go straight to the fuel pump. So all those 4 fuses will be controlled by this relay via the ECU. So that will take care of that. I may just add an extra fuse in there because we've got 2 fuel pumps. We've got our lift pump and our main one. The lift pump will only draw about an amp, but it'll be good to keep them on a different fuse. So that one's not got the 30 amp fuse of the bigger pump. So this is all going to be ready to go in the car. There'll all be spades on the back. So I'll label all them up just in case they do ever get connected. Our relay will sit nice and neat on the top. We can put this relay next to it as well to power the coils, which means all this wiring is way too long. So we can shorten this right down because the fuse box sits right next to the ECU. So all this will be trimmed down and then it will look a lot better. So now that is plugged into the ECU, we can start looking at our lengths. So we've got both ECU plugs plugged in. It looks a little bit of a spaghetti, but it is all under control. We've got our lambda wire, which is also extremely long because the lambda sensor is just the other side of the bulkhead there. So that can be shortened right down. We don't really want that coiled up behind the dash. So I'll shorten that down, make it really nice. Our airflow meter is the perfect length. So that goes through the bulkhead, through the grommet and sits perfectly on the airflow meter. So we can keep that one the same. All our power wires are going to go to the back of the fuse box. They can be shortened down nicely. And then we've got our reverse wires and our starter wire that we pulled through with the start and charge loom. And the reverse wires need to go up to the yellow plug, which is actually the headlight plugs. On the Caddy, in the headlight loom, it actually has a few wires that we need. It's got the brake light switch, so that needs to be connected over to our brake lights. And it's also got the alternator and the reverse lights, which is this one here, labelled reverse. So we'll shorten all them down and they'll go in behind the fuse box, so they'll all be connected up nice and neat and out of sight. Then we've got this loom that travels over here, which is for our pedals. So there is our blue drive-by-wire plug and our Passat brake switch we put in. So it's got the 4 terminals, 2 for the brake lights, which will go to the yellow plug, and then 2 for the ECU, which will connect to our ECU loom. So the 14A plug that we chopped off the loom actually comes out here. And I did put a plug on it, and that's got our coil live, our injectors, our sensors and an earth. And the little one is for the coolant gauge. So they're all just poked in the bay. They were just long enough to poke through. And next to that are the 4 wires that we've connected up at the front, which were for the old speedo and the old oil level sensor. But now they're for our alternator and oil pressure. So we've got all them noted down where they need to go, so we can connect these. We'll put another plug on it, just like that one. And it'll all still be detachable. So we'll chop these and start getting things in the right place. Before plugging it into the fuse box, I just had to swap that plug over. Because remember, we saw right at the beginning in the wiring, this one had a little fire in the fuse box. But luckily we had another plug in stock. So I just had to push the remainder of the pins that was all cut off from that one. And then plug our ones back in, and now we are connected to the loom. For these round ones, you need a little terminal tool like this, which goes into the hole. Then in the middle, as you put it in, pushes the tabs in, has a little pokey that then pushes the pins out the back, just like so. That is out. So these are really handy. We've got the different sizes for the different pins, and that makes the job a lot easier, just swapping that round. So now this one can go in the museum of burnt out parts. This one can go in the car. And the other thing we've got out ready is our label maker, and we've got it inserted with heat shrink. So I'll be able to label up all the wires that go into the back of the fuse box, because these are going to be on spades. So if they ever become unplugged, every wire will be labelled with its own little shrink sleeve. So that'll make the job a lot neater and a lot easier in the future. We've got our yellow plug, which is all our headlight looms, headlights, indicators, radiator fans, everything else that goes to the front, and they're going to run under here all the way and just poke out and just connect to the top there, so they'll all be hidden. And they'll just pop out, I drilled a little hole, and they'll connect to there. So we could probably get the front end off, and that'll give us a lot more access into the car as well. Underneath the car, I've done a little mod to the standard downpipe for now, just so when we get it up running, it's not firing into the steering rack. And that's because I wanted somewhere to connect up my lambda. So I've just cut and shut the downpipe and just done a little slash cut so it's flush with the bottom. But that just means that it clears the steering rack so when we start it, that'll be fine, and I've got somewhere to plug into the lander. So we will get a full exhaust system made, but the quality of this, I think Jack might just use my downpipe, but we will see. That's just giving us somewhere for the first start. And we're back to being naked again. That has given me a lot more space. I kept struggling to get past the door on and off the ramp, squeezing in, but now I can sit on my perch and wire in a lot easier. And now I can put the looms back out and run them along our pegs that we put in previously. Get the lights, the horn, the fan, everything else wired up at the same time. And they'll go through the hole with the bonnet cable. So let's carry on spaghettiing. So on the fuse box, we're going to start with fuse 4, which is for the airflow meter and lambda feeds. So on the fuse box, I'm going to label this side A, and then that'll be the inputs, and B is the outputs to the ECU. So we'll do 4B, airflow meter, lambda plus. We've got our heat shrink in, print, and out it comes. And then we'll snip that. And then we've got our heat shrink, which is labelled, ready to go. So on my notes, we've got 4A is coming from the fuel pump relay, 4B is going to the brown plug, pin 5, which is our blue and yellow wire. So we've got this coming out where we want it, and give that a snip. See ya. And then we'll just clean off the insulation. That's ready for our fancy heat shrink. So it prints flat, but it actually opens up like a little tube, like normal heat shrink. That goes on. And then you just shrink it down, just like normal with a hot air gun. So we've got these nice little clear boots that go on, just to protect the terminal. Slide right on. Don't forget them, that's like forgetting your flare on a brake line. And then we've got non-insulated open barrel terminals. Go in the crimper. Like that, nice. And then the boot just comes over the top. And we're safe, protected and labelled, ready to go on the fuse box. So we've just got 6 fuses, 12 wires to do. Come back when we've done them. Next up, 2B, ECU, ignition. That just saves a bit of wastage. We'll get those two on next. So something that I'm going to do slightly differently now. This is our main engine loom that comes through and goes to the ECU, and the extra wires that we had to go to our coil, the earth, the injectors and the sensors, their powers, which are going to go up next to these ones on the fuse box. And then I just had the coolant temperature gauge sender, which will go up to our gauge on the dash. That's all we were going to use. Now we are using these spare wires, which I'm glad I did leave, for our alternator, our DFM on the alternator. We've got our 2 oil pressure high and low, and then we've still got 1 spare there. So I've got 5 here, and then we've got this one on its own. In our kit of plugs, we've actually got a 6er. So I think instead of just having 1 and lots of singles, if I put this 6 on here as well, we'll just have these 2 plugs next to each other, so we can still unplug the loom if we ever wanted to take the engine out. It'll all be plug and play still. So I'm going to take this single one off, and that will go straight into this one. And then we can get all these in, and we'll have 2 nice neat plugs there, making the engine loom completely detachable for the car, because there's nothing worse if we did have to take it out having to cut all the wires, but like this will just be plug and play, and then this one goes to the ECU direct. So that'll just make it easier to get these up to here and here, and it'll all be on plugs. So I'll get these clicked in, get our label maker out, marking what's what, so the plan is always changing. And like that, we've got 2 nice little plugs there, all labelled, looking much better, and they still do fit through the hole as well. So now we've got to make the male ends and join these up to where we want to go. Right, I think I am going to wrap up this episode here now. We've got lots of things planned out. Things are now in their right places, so we know what lengths to make wires. We've got a lot of it sitting in the bay now. All the starting and charging, reverse lights are all installed correctly, so the bay is pretty much as it should be. We've still got the lighting loom to come along here, so that will go along and then pop into the headlights. But apart from that, the engine bay is as full of wiring as it is going to be. So we've got to carry on inside. We've got all our plugs on, so that'll make it detachable. So if the engine ever does have to come out, the loom can come out just like factory. Just a little bit of future-proof in there. But I'm going to wrap this one up here because I've got a lot of editing ahead, because this whole episode is going to have to be voice-overed. Hopefully, it still turns out okay. Hopefully, you can still keep track of the progress going on. And don't forget, you guys can be part of the Caddy crew as well. We've got Caddy crew hoodies, t-shirts, stickers, all available down in the description. So you can show everyone you are part of the Caddy crew as well. So make sure you give this video a like. And until next time, make sure you have fun.